Close your eyes for a moment and forget the aridity that now dominates the shores of the Dead Sea. 4 millennia ago, this landscape was the opposite of what we know today. The Jordan Valley pulsed like a green heart in the midst of the Near East. The waters of the Jordan River, clear and generous, overflowed into channels that nourished lush vegetation. Date palms swayed gently in the wind, acacias stretched their shaded canopies, and the scent of wet earth and wildflowers filled the air. It was truly like the garden of the Lord. In this oasis of abundance, 2 men observed the horizon from a high hill: Abraham, the patriarch, and Lot, his nephew. The sun reflected on the waters and the distant walls of the cities in the plain. Lot saw not just land, he saw potential. He saw the prosperity that the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah promised. Driven by the desire for security and wealth, Lot made his decision. He separated his flocks from Abraham's and moved down into the plains, pitching his tents ever closer to the gates of Sodom. Upon entering the city, the contrast was absolute. Sodom was a metropolis of white limestone that gleamed under the midday sun. Its streets were paved, surrounded by multi-story buildings and palaces adorned with bronze and cedar details. In the central markets, the activity was frenzied. Merchants from distant lands traded spices whose aroma mingled with the scent of fine leathers and colorful silks. The laughter of the inhabitants was loud. They wore fine linen and gold jewelry that jingled with every step. But if we look closely, the shadows of Sodom were as dense as their light was bright. Between the marble pillars and lavish feasts, pride had become the law. Abundance had bred cruel indifference. Where there should have been hospitality for the wearied traveler, there was mockery. Where there should have been justice for the orphan and the widow, there was exploitation. Moral injustice was not just an isolated act, it was the culture of that city. The outcry against Sodom rose like an invisible smoke, a silent cry demanding a response from the heavens. The time of abundance was coming to an end.
The sun was beginning to set, casting long, distorted shadows across the narrow streets of Sodom. Lot was seated by the main gate, a place of authority and judgment, but his expression was one of deep concern. He watched the decay around him when suddenly 2 men appeared on the path. They were not ordinary travelers. Their appearance radiated perfection and dignity that silenced the chaos around them. Their garments, though simple, seemed to repel the desert dust. Lot, moved by instinctive urgency and fear for what the city might do to such noble strangers, hurried to welcome them. He bent to the ground, his heavy breathing revealing the tension. "Enter the house of your servant," he pleaded. Inside, Lot tried to maintain his composure. He offered unleavened bread and water to wash their feet, while his daughters watched with curiosity and fear from behind the curtains. But the peace was brutally interrupted. The sound of marching footsteps began to echo against the stone walls. A mob began to gather, growing like a wave of hatred. Men from all parts of the city, fiery youths and hardened elders, surrounded the house. The glow of torches reflected off the sweat on their aggressive faces. Shouts and violent pounding on the solid wooden door made the structure tremble. Lot stepped out to confront them. His gestures were pleading, his trembling voice attempting to appeal to the reason that no longer existed in that crowd. He was willing to sacrifice everything, to protect the sacred law of hospitality. As violence was about to erupt, the angels intervened. With a calm and powerful movement, they pulled Lot inside the house, and with a flash of white light, struck the mob with blindness. The roar of hatred turned into moans of confusion. Powerful men now staggered, groping along the clay walls, lost in their own inner darkness. The fate of Sodom was sealed.
Dawn arrived with a sky of impossible colors. Deep purple and blazing orange struggled against the bluish light of the morning. "Flee for your life!" the angels' voices thundered, contained yet powerful. Lot still hesitated, looking at his belongings, at the life he had built, but the celestial hand allowed no more delay. The angels seized Lot, his wife and his daughters, literally dragging them out of the city limits. "Do not look back," was the final warning. They began to run. The ground beneath their feet trembled. The air suddenly grew hot, thick with the smell of sulfur. And then the sky tore open. It was no ordinary storm. Balls of molten fire and glowing sulfur rained from the clouds like meteors of judgment. Wherever each drop of fire fell, destruction was instantaneous. The buildings of Sodom, symbols of pride, collapsed as if made of paper. The paved streets melted under the extreme heat. Rivers of molten rock began to flow where commerce and laughter once thrived. Thick black smoke rose to the heavens, blocking out the sunlight, where gray ashes fell like a funeral snow across the entire plain. In the midst of the desperate flight, lungs burning from exertion and the caustic air, Lot's wife made a fatal mistake. Perhaps it was longing for her luxurious home, or the shock of the explosions behind her. She stopped, she hesitated, and she looked back. In that instant, time froze for her. The intense heat and mineral-saturated air struck her. Her skin crystallized, her muscles turned to saltstone. In seconds, she went from a fleeing woman to a pillar of salt, an eternal monument to a heart that could not let go of what God had already judged. Lot and his daughters continued to run, their faces streaked with tears and ash, daring not to look back, while Sodom and Gomorrah disappeared in a furnace of fire and smoke.
The silence that followed the destruction was louder than any explosion. From the heights of the mountains of Hebron, Abraham rose early to look toward the valley. What he saw was no longer the garden of the Lord. A thick, dark smoke rose from the entire land of the plain, like the vapor of a gigantic furnace that had consumed everything. The once prosperous cities had been reduced to ashes and silence. The valley of Siddim had become a basin of desolation. The waters that once gave life had become so saturated with salt and minerals that no fish could swim, no plant could grow along its shores. The Dead Sea was born from that judgment, a geographical tomb for human pride. On the slopes of Mount Sodom, pillars of salt, strangely sculpted by the wind, remain to this day. Silent sentinels that seem to watch over the invisible ruins beneath the waters. Lot and his daughters found refuge in a dark, cold cave. Their clothes were torn and covered in soot. Their eyes carried the shock of those who had witnessed the end of the world. They had survived, but they had lost everything except their lives and the opportunity to begin again. There, among the shadows of the cave, life struggled to find a new rhythm. And in the dust gathered at the entrance, something small happened. A tiny green shoot, nourished by a crack of light and a single drop of moisture, pushed through the dry soil. A sign that life always seeks to persist after the fire. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is not merely an account of archaeology or an ancient myth. It remains a mirror for humanity. It speaks to us about the danger of wealth without ethics and the comfort that blinds the soul to the suffering of others. It teaches us that divine justice, though patient, is inevitable when the cry of oppression becomes unbearable. But above all, it is a lesson about the courage to move forward toward the light without allowing the false glow of a condemned past to turn us into statues of salt. The sun sets over the Dead Sea, but the light of truth continues to illuminate the path of those who choose justice.